Hi, Dana. How are you?
I'm good, thanks. How are you?
Great, great.
Mhm.
Now, I guess let's start. Just get straight into it. What's your background? Where did you hail from, and did you train? Did you study? How did you get into this business?
Well, I started doing piano at a young age. So I think lessons started at around 5 or 6 years old.
Mhm.
And I grew up in Canada. So I went through the Royal Conservatory of Music in
Sure.
Toronto with piano lessons. And I finished all the grades and then I went off to university and I studied something completely different.
Okay, that's common. Yeah, yeah,
Yeah. And which was good because then I realized what I didn't want to do with my life.
hmm
And I even worked in business for about 2 years, 2.5 years. I had studied economics and finance, and
Oh, that is quite different. Yeah, yeah,
I was
yeah.
working on Bay Street and 9 to 5 job, and I was really unhappy. So, and I was always though obsessively working on songs. Like I'd get home from work and I just play piano,
Mhm.
compose music, and then I'd get up early in the morning, notating my music, trying to enter it into competitions. So I
Sure.
was obviously still really, I was passionate about music.
Yes.
But I think growing up, it was never talked about as a possible career.
Mm. Mm.
It was always, you've got to get a good job that gives you security and
This is solid advice, Dana. But yeah, no, I mean, music's many things, but it's never going to be secure. It doesn't matter. I think.
no, it has been hard, but I think sometimes you realize that you're better off doing something you enjoy,
Mm.
even though it can be hard at times, having to do multiple jobs to help
Yes,
support that.
yes.
So yeah, and then after that, I actually quit my business job and went off to Africa for 4 months
Oh, fantastic.
and trying to find myself and do some environmental work and social work. So, and I found myself just thinking about music
Mm.
all the time and missing my piano. And so then when I got back to the city and back to Canada, I decided to pursue music. So
Sure, sure.
yeah, and then I went off to Los Angeles to study at City College um, in LA. So yeah, and I just loved it.
Yeah. And
Yeah.
what did you study there specifically?
It was music in general. So I was studying theory, even though I'd already had a good understanding of theory, but I was quite rusty and I hadn't actually done gone as far as I did when I went back to school with the theory. And then also composition. I was a part of the composers club, and there were activities that we were able to participate. There was the Christopher Coppola Film Festival, and so I did some work with that. And
writing to picture and things like that.
yes,
Yeah.
and I just loved it. It was so much fun, and there were lots of opportunities like that. And also, we had a string quartet come into the school, and we wrote a piece of music for them. All of the people in the composers club, all of the musicians, and then we got to have our pieces played by them at a concert. So yeah, there were just lots of opportunities that that really kind of opened the door for me, and made me really want to pursue composing.
And I guess made you understand, see it as a sort of a semi-viable career path.
Yeah, it's just something that even if it wasn't going to be a career, then maybe it would be a fun hobby I could continue. I never really knew for sure if it would be a career for me, but I just loved doing it, so I wanted to pursue it.
Well, and it's paying off. Obviously, you're award winning now.
Yeah.
So that must have felt pretty good. So your latest project, Whina, it's just Whina, isn't it? Yeah. Can you tell us a bit about that? And you collaborated on it as well.
Yes.
Yeah.
So my husband was one of the directors. So he kind of told me, as soon as he started working on it, he started writing the script with Paula, the other director. And as soon as he started working on it, he said, start thinking of music. And I said, oh, well, are you sure? I mean, I haven't been hired, but he said, just start thinking about it and start coming up with ideas. So I didn't know if I was going to have the job or not, but
sure.
So they hadn't even finished the script, but I just started playing around with ideas and different sounds. And there were lots of delays with that film as well. So I would start working on it and then things would get delayed, and then I would stop working on it and work on something else, and then I'd go back to it. So it was quite spread out.
Over what sort of time period? Over quite a long period?
I don't know, maybe 2 years or something.
Yeah, that sounds like movies, really, doesn't it? Yeah.
And because it happened also during COVID.
Sure.
So there were lots of delays, like there was delays in some of the filming, I think. And then there were delays in post-production. And then, and I worked with Horomona, and we were able to meet up, which was nice.
So how did that collaboration start, I guess? Was that something the director, I mean, at some point, obviously, you were signed on as the composer.
Yeah, well, I knew that I wanted to include Tangaporo in some of the compositions. It just felt like it had to be there.
Sure.
And so I always had that in mind, even though I'd already started on a lot of the music. But I knew the opening piece, I definitely wanted to have some Maori instruments in there. And then there were a few other spots throughout that we thought that we need that to help support what's going on.
And did Horomona play all these instruments, or?
Yeah, so we met up in person. We discussed the film, and I think it was Paula, one of the directors. She had given me his information and said he's from up north. He's great. Contact him. Let's meet up with him and start dialogue. Figure out where we can go from here. So we met up, and it was before COVID, so we were able to meet up in person. And then, but he is located outside of Auckland, so we did some Zoom calls, and he demonstrated some of the instruments, and I kind of took notes of the ones that I really liked. And then there was quite a big delay before then I actually had the final footage, and I knew exactly where I wanted to have some of the instruments.
So you were writing pretty blind to start with, just.
Yeah, I was. Before any of the footage, I was writing a lot of pieces.
Yes.
And then once they filmed, we started getting bits of scenes, even though they weren't fully cut. And I had a better idea of what was needed. And then through the editing process, they started using some of the pieces that I'd sent through.
Right, to cut.
And just sliding them in to see, what would work.
Sure.
And they even cut some of the scenes to the music, which was quite good, which makes it work pretty well.
Yeah, definitely.
So it did shape some of the editing.
Right.
And then,
because in film school, I was always sort of told that you get you'll get the final cut, and then it'll all be there, and then you just write the music. But of course, it's never like that. I've almost never had a project, or it's like a rough cut, and it's like 4 hours long. So you were getting like little bits and pieces. Did you ever get a whole like cut of the whole thing?
Yeah, but then we were in lockdown, so I think it went into final cut. And it was something like the next day we went into that huge lockdown.
Oh, that really long one, yeah.
And I've got 2 small kids at home,
yes.
a 2-year-old and a 5-year-old at the time.
Must have been fun.
And it was suddenly like, okay, here it is. And I think I probably had about a third left of the film to do.
Right.
So it was still, there's a lot done. But there was still, I mean, it was really difficult. It was such a challenge. And my husband was also working. So, I mean, it was just, I don't even want to think back to that time. It was really...
I think many of us would like to just move on and forget that.
Yeah.
Hoping we won't ever have another one.
Yeah.
So how do you record at home? How do you actually work? And especially when you've got toddlers running around your decks and things.
For Whina, I actually did a lot of, it was mostly just MIDI. So, and there was some stuff that I had recorded previously before the lockdown, which was good on cello, because I kind of can barely play cello, but I can make some sounds.
Okay.
I had done
whack it with the bow a few times. Yeah.
There was a piece in there that had some cello that I'd pre-recorded, so that was quite handy, because otherwise it would have been really hard to record kids at home. So I did already have a piece that I had done myself with the recording. And then with Horomona, he was recording at his home studio, I think. So he would send stuff through, and then we'd communicate just online.
And boring questions, what are you working in? What do you record in?
What's that?
Which software do you work on?
Oh, I use Logic.
Use Logic, okay.
Yeah.
That's increasingly common, isn't it? And so you're working mainly with sort of sample libraries and things like that to get the sound. Yeah. For the current film that I'm working on now, though, it's a combination. So I've hired a violinist and violist, and she's recorded a bunch of stuff for me already, and I'm kind of mixing that in with my MIDI stuff. All right. So is that stuff that she's improvised, or you've scored, or a bit of both?
I've notated it for her, and it's everything that I've written it out for her. So but there's still more time before I have to deliver the score. So I'm hoping to do some more live recordings with other musicians.
And you've got to go and do that elsewhere, and then sort of bring it home and chop it up.
Yeah.
All right. And obviously you've done, this has been a lovely success for this project. Are you able to talk about this current job, or are you sworn to secrecy?
Yeah, it's actually final cut now.
Right.
So I'm supposed to deliver the score before Christmas.
Okay.
A little bit stressful.
Yeah, fair enough.
But it's a New Zealand, American, and Polish production.
Oh.
And it's about a ballerina, so it's based on a true story. And my husband is the writer-director, so I'll be working with him again, which is great. It's quite.
Wow. And you're still obviously talking to each other. So,
yeah.
So can you describe what this score will be like in comparison?
Yeah. So there is some electronic stuff in there, and there is lots of strings, some piano, and because it's a ballet piece, there will also a ballet film. There will also be other pieces in there, like Tchaikovsky, Mendelssohn.
You haven't had that. I've had that before, where they give you a brief. They give you a day, and they say it needs to sound like this Bach piece.
Yeah.
And you're like, oh god, I'll just generate that. So you actually can use the actual piece.
Yeah, which is great. because I mean it would feel wrong if those pieces weren't in there.
Well, in a ballet piece, yes.
Yeah, and
Yes.
so yeah, so there will be a lot of non-score music in there.
Right.
Yeah.
And for the the more orchestral, sounds more orchestral sort of stuff, are you combining? So you use like a viola and a violin or something and combine it with sample sounds, or how do you work?
Yeah, I will be combining with the sample sounds. So there's a recording that's going to take place in about a week or so, and so I'm going to try to have some stuff written by then.
Hope this interview doesn't take too long. But yes.
And then that will be mixed in just to give it a bigger sound.
Sure.
With my orchestral libraries.
And you sort of, how do you work with the live stuff? You sort of layer it up a bit as well, or is it?
Yeah, I'll probably layer it up.
Yeah.
We'll probably have one cellist.
Yes.
And one violist, one violinist kind of thing. So I'll have to, because there'll be, so I'll probably have to layer up chords and stuff. And
yes.
Yeah.
It's a bit mind-bending sometimes, but particularly if you've got big, and you've got to play line 1, line 2, line 3.
Yeah. So it'll be a bit of a trial and error probably as well. But I'll always got the MIDI to fall back on.
And sort of blend in. Yes.
Yeah.
I've had some instances where I've gone away and, I've had the MIDI sort of mock up and then go and record the live stuff. And then the client doesn't like it at all. Like, they don't like it. It sounds so different.
I know. That has actually happened with one of the pieces I wrote for 2 violas. And I just did a MIDI mock-up for the director and for James, and he really loved the MIDI mock-up. And then I notated it for the violinist, and I really liked it, but he said, it's not the same feel, because he's so used to the MIDI sound.
Yes.
That even though it's just the same notes being played, but I guess like the timbre is different. That it's just.
I mean that's the curse. Sorry.
Yeah. No, it just conveys a different feeling for that scene, and so it's a bit disappointing for me because I feel like I'd love to just use the real instruments, but it doesn't always work out that way.
Now, look, we have purists within the guild and all sorts of people who love to work with full orchestra and full, but in my experience, and most of the people I've worked with, it's always this sort of hybrid approach, just because of budgets, because of timing, but also because of the sound. Sometimes a big, rich, or particularly with, I've been working in the documentary space quite a lot, that if you have one sort of solo instrument, it can just interfere too much with what's going on at the screen, and you want it quite sort of back a lot of the time. And the second you put in a live violin, particularly, it sort of there's an emotive quality that is beautiful, but it's not always that sounds like. Yes,
I think that's going to be the challenge, is when we do some live recordings coming up, that it's still able to convey that same feeling. But we're going to try it anyway and see.
Do you work with, do any, this particular director or other ones work with temp tracks or reference tracks like in the cut already?
So a lot of my stuff is already in there, is for the temp score, and it's already working. Then there's also other pieces that are in there. Like there is a Bach piece, and I'm just like, oh my God, I'm not going to try.
Why not?
So it can be frustrating sometimes when all you can hear is that temp piece, and it kind of makes you a bit crazy. You're just thinking, I've got to try to do it like that, but it also can't sound too much like that. It's got to be different enough.
have you tried the walk around the block approach? I listen to it and then I go for a walk, come back, and then just
it does help. I've got a dog, so I do have to go for walks every day, and I often think about what I'm working on when I go for the walks and kind of plan out, well, what could I try, and is there another piece I have that I could make a variation of it that would work? And so it is quite helpful.
Change the keys, speed it up a bit, you know. Like, and no, it's quite tricky to walk that line. And of course, as you've just said, directors get wedded to the sound of a certain piece, and if they've heard it too much, it's sometimes incredibly hard to get it over that line.
It is.
Have you ever had any failures, like where you just haven't been able to crack what they want?
At the moment, I'm experiencing that.
Oh, you're sorry.
And it's that's today's the day I have to try to crack it. I tried to crack it yesterday and I couldn't. But it's like a big orchestral piece,
right?
And it's it seems quite daunting to me because it's got to hit there's certain beats that it's got to hit. And I already tried, and I was quite happy with what I did, but it wasn't what the director wanted. It wasn't. He said just completely redo it. So that's what I'm battling with that now, and I've got the deadline of delivering the score, and I'm trying to write this big orchestral piece, and so that's probably at the moment I'm failing at that.
I'm sorry to bring up the trauma. I'm sure you'll succeed, and sometimes just multiple walks around the block and taking a totally different approach. How do you, I mean, I see people. I'm a pianist, and I'm not a. I tend to focus on a melody for a big orchestral piece. So I don't get sort of overwhelmed by the. Trying to suddenly get a sense of scale. So how do you approach that? You write a melody first and then build it up, or
that's what I'm doing at the moment with this piece, is because there's kind of like a melody that introduces the piece, and it's just going to be like higher string sounds, like a orchestral, quite not just one violin, but a big sound. So that's going to introduce then when the big orchestra comes in. So I'm kind of working on that, trying to get a good melody, which then will lead into the orchestra, which will be based on that melody. So so that is what I'm trying to accomplish at the moment.
And do you do all the orchestration arrangement yourself? Do you ever collaborate? You do it all? You enjoy doing it?
So and I'm doing it on my own. So
all right. The lonely life of a composer. It's quite and how do you collaborate? I mean, obviously you did on the previous film. Do you enjoy collaborating, or you prefer to sort of do your own thing and bring in people as you
I mean, I probably the only time I collaborated was with Whina. When I was in school, I loved collaborating with other musicians. That was really fun. But I haven't actually done that so much since I've been in New Zealand. Just kind of been on my own. I've been trying to learn other instruments. I think when I first moved out here, I was trying to find other people to improvise with and write music with, and I really struggled to find other people. So that's when I bought a cello and I started taking lessons, and then I also bought a viola and started taking lessons.
Sure. So you can be a one-man or one-woman band.
Well, it just allowed me to. I can't play them very well, but it allowed me to kind of explore the instrument a bit better instead of having someone there and be like, can you try this, or what would this sound like, or can you play these two notes at the same time? And
do you find do you compose on these other instruments at all?
I have.
Is it different than writing on?
Yeah, it is.
Yeah.
Yeah. You just come up with different stuff that you might not normally have come up with.
And do you think sometimes being a bit limited in your ability, I mean, you're confident obviously on the piano, do you think that constraint works creatively in a positive way?
With the other instruments?
Yeah.
I'm not
like
sure.
you're like, I don't know how to do that, or I can't physically do that, so you sort of
possibly, maybe. I mean, what I do on those instruments is pretty simple, so which sometimes works for a film piece. It doesn't. You don't want it to be. You don't want too much going on.
Yes.
So it can sometimes work, but I would like, once I have more time, once the kids are a bit older, I'd love to actually take lessons, cello lessons again, viola lessons again, and really study those instruments just because I love strings.
Or train the kids up so you've got a big little ensemble there,
Yeah.
So I won't feed you unless you hit the, Now I have slightly, I do have some questions, or a couple of questions here from our guild, high up type people. Because we're about to do a workshop around what they call handover, like when you're handing over, your working files or your music files, your mixes or whatever to the post sort of people. Who did you work with Whina? Was it Native Audio? Was it?
No, Images and Sound.
Sound, right? Yeah.
And they were really great.
Yeah. Did you have much understanding of how to hand over stuff? Or did they walk you through it, or how did that work?
No, Ben at Images and Sound, he was very helpful. He kind of, he pretty much gave me a write-up of how to hand things over.
Right.
And when I had technical difficulties, he would, we'd jump on a Zoom call, or he'd email me, or we'd talk on the phone, and he would kind of walk me through it. So,
sure.
And it was also because it was during lockdown when I was delivering, I couldn't actually be in the room with anyone else.
Sure.
Whereas on this next project that I'm working on, I've hired someone else to hand it over.
So kind of what, like a music?
Like a pre-mixer.
Oh, okay. All right. All right. Yeah.
So they're going to help with the delivery. They're going to kind of pre-mix my stuff and help deliver it to the what are they called? Department of Post.
Department of Post, right. Yeah. Sure. So was this a new for Whina? Was that the first time you kind of had these sort of technical handovers, or?
Yeah.
So I'm interested because this is what we want to do some work around. I mean, speaking personally, I mean, I've worked in music for a long time, but I've never ever had anybody say, I mean, short of working with somebody great like Ben, giving you an actual like step-by-step account of how you actually hand over. Yeah. And so in any of your training, did you ever cover anything like that at all?
No, never.
Yeah. Because that's what we suspect is that, well, we know because having dealt on both ends of, getting files from other people and sending files, it seems to be different in every situation. There doesn't seem to be any standards. There's no explanation. So you agree?
Yeah, I've never been taught how to do that. And then even trying to, Google things online, how to do it, like I couldn't really find, like, I just found it challenging. And because I don't do it very often, it was something that I was doing like once a month.
Yes.
And I'd probably be fine with it. But like now, I don't even remember how I did it all.
Well, you'd have you start to get a process and a bit of a system.
Yeah.
But as you say, if you're working on a film once every year, 2 years or something, and maybe smaller projects as well, and you're going to be working with a different post-production house or different music editor or a different sound mixer. Yeah, so that's something that we are looking at as a guild.
And, and it was helpful having like the step-by-step how to hand it over. But then there were times when I would run into like technical difficulties, like I was getting like some moments of, it was like 10 seconds of silence before some of the stems, and I didn't know why. And and I think now it was to do with my automation, but it was like at the time I was just like, why does this keep happening? And I was trying to Google it and I couldn't figure it out, and there was no one that I could ask for help. Whereas I actually have leaned on my pre-mixer technical guy quite a bit, which has been really great, because then it allows me to just focus on the composing side as opposed to the technical stuff.
Yes, I think the general, I mean, from my own experience and other, people we work with, generally the budgets are not that great, or are reducing, and we can talk about that if you like. So there's, in the States or in Canada or in Europe, you're going to generally have I guess, more of a team. You're also going to have a budget to have somebody like a pre-mixer or even a music editor that will work with you as part of the team, and then you're handing it off to, but that's very uncommon in my experience in New Zealand.
I mean, it's coming out of my fee that I'm having to hire someone. So, and some people might not want, I mean, it can be expensive, and I guess I'm kind of justifying, I just want it to be good. And take away, I mean, the technical stress of which is not really your role, is it? But I want to use that time to be composing. I don't want to be sitting there Googling
fighting with software
at 2 in the morning.
Agreed. All right, well, that's obviously, I mean, we all need some knowledge on that as well. So that's in the pipeline. Actually, Ben Sinclair from Images and Sound is on a mission, because of course it drives them crazy as well, because they have to deal with all these endless, new composers, of which there are many, generating stuff in some haphazard way, in the way they've learned to do it with Logic or Pro Tools or whoever, and then just sort of throwing it at them, and of course it makes their job incredibly tough. But at that point we're usually completely over it. We've done our creative work, and you just want to hand it to them. So where do you see, I guess, the next few years for you? You've got this film in the pipeline. Are you looking? This is all local content. Do you look overseas, or what's the plan?
Well, I mean, James, my husband, has pretty much said like he wants me to do every film he does.
Okay.
So, but I've always said, don't you feel free to hire someone else. Like, you don't have to always hire. So I guess I might be doing his next film, but we don't always know when that will be. There's, one possibility, an American one, but I think it'll get some New Zealand funding as well. Because I think it's already had some New Zealand funding, so it'll be kind of a New Zealand American film. But I'm not really sure. I kind of feel like after I finish this current film, I just want to have a break.
Fair enough.
And then just compose for fun for a little bit. But at the same time, I know I'll probably start missing it. I'll miss not having a project.
So you mentioned you write other pieces just for fun. Do you publish other stuff or release other stuff?
I haven't. I've kind of put some stuff on my SoundCloud, but I haven't really. I haven't come up with anything else, but it's something I'd like to do. I'd like to, have an album of just pieces I like. That haven't been in films. But maybe that'll be an in-between project, in between films.
Sure. Well, these are good problems to have as well. If you've got it's a bit of a luxury to have, one big film project after another. Even the super duper pros here, have big gaps between work. And I
Yeah.
guess, yeah, how do you manage that? Because I mean, it sounds like you've had a good run. But, I often ask people how they manage the downtime, how they manage the times maybe when there's no work, or
Well, I do teach piano, so I've got about 20 something students every week.
Yeah.
So that's my kind of other source of income that's more predictable.
Sure.
And I also enjoy it. It's because composing can also be quite antisocial on your own.
Yes.
And so it's quite nice to have that social part of the job. And yeah, and I've got 2 kids, so
yeah, that'll fill in the rest of the time.
Yeah.
Yeah. Fantastic.
Yeah.
And well, look, obviously we'll put a link and things for your website and all that sort of stuff in the information.
Which I haven't actually updated in a very long time.
Well, there'll be a link there anyway, but if you want at some point. But obviously, you know, it'd be lovely to have you involved with other guild events and things like that. And it is as you've mentioned, and most people in the guild mentioned, it's quite a lonely craft as well. So a major part of the guild's work is trying to connect and kind of have events. Obviously, the last 3 years have been absolutely impossible, but we just had an in-person event last week in Auckland, and we've got more coming up around the country. So I encourage you to come along and kind of as a way of connecting and just shouting out. There are tons of brilliant, talented players. I always say, like, if I don't know somebody or something, I'll just put the word out to the guild. You always get pretty much anything and everybody, any culture, any instrument, any style. New Zealand's just overflowing with talent. So I encourage you to try that out. Yeah. Is there anything else you want to talk about, or are you happy with anything you're excited about? Any challenges you see for you or the industry or your career? You can't see beyond that orchestral piece that you've got to finish.
Yeah, I'm probably too worried thinking about that orchestral piece to the moment. But I don't know. I guess I don't know if there's anything else I can cover.
Get writing, I'd say. Go for a walk and try that piece.
Yeah.
Well, thank you very much for your time today.
Yeah, thank you.
Appreciate it.